Hey kids, welcome to Astro Chats. Okay, tonight to get into the spooky Halloween spirit, we're going to be taking a swing around our solar system by talking about moons and mythology, specifically of the moons of other planets in our system. And there's a lot of really cool space news that came out this week, so you're going to learn about how the universe is a little less lonely from a study done at the University of Nottingham, and how there's a new member of our solar neighborhood. And we're going to close the show off with something that's been tugging at my brain a little bit lately in a segment called Why Study Science at a Liberal Arts School? Alright, stay tuned. Alright, so jumping into our first story of the night, we're going to be talking about moons and mythology. So, it's pretty common knowledge that the planets in our solar system are named after Roman gods. Like Venus is the god of love and beauty, Mars is the god of war, Jupiter is the king of gods, and Saturn is kind of the odd one out, being the god of agriculture, which is super adorable. Like Mars is waging war, and Pluto's like being the god of the underworld, and Saturn is just like tilling some corn somewhere. So cute. Saturn, you're my fave. But how do moons get their names? Well, it depends on where you look. So the first moons were discovered around Jupiter, and they were named for Greek mythology. And it's general practice to name those moons after Zeus's, who is the Greek version of Jupiter, after Zeus's lovers. Where the four Galilean moons are named Io, Europa, Callista, and Ganymede. And that's where their names come from. They were Zeus's lovers. So it's important to remember that Zeus was a really big player, and he was a real hit-it-and-quit-it guy, and he got around. So his main lady was Hera, who is the goddess of marriage and childbirth, and she often ran around persecuting other women Zeus had affairs with. So Io, which is the first Galilean moon that I mentioned, her mythology is really a train wreck, as most of these stories are. So Io is a moon of Jupiter known for its volcanic activity. And Zeus is just chilling with Io on the moon until Hera comes over, and Zeus is like, oh god, and turns Io into a cow to keep Hera from getting suspicious. That didn't work, of course, so Hera was super suspicious and pretended to love the cow to get Zeus to gift it to her. And then she sent it away to a guy with like 100 eyes, and Zeus had Hermes go kill that guy to set Io free, but Hera got pissed and set a bunch of bugs to sting her, and the ghost of the guy who was guarding her that was killed was chasing her, so Io was like going insane and wandering the world until she ran into a chained up Prometheus, who prophesied that she'd be returned to her human form, give birth, and one of her descendants would set him free. Eventually, Io somehow found her way to the Nile, where Zeus turned her back into a human, and she gave birth to a son, and 11 generations later, she gave birth to Hercules was born, and he totally set Prometheus free. So, Greek mythology is pretty screwed up, and the other moon stories are just as chaotic as Io's. But if you look deeper in the solar system, the moons around Uranus are actually named from characters from the works of Shakespeare and a poet named Alexander Pope. To name a few, there's Oberon, Titania, and Puck from A Midsummer's Night Dream, and Ariel and Miranda from The Tempest. Neptune's really not that interesting. It just goes back to Greek mythology, this time with like water deities or something. We don't really care. Going past that to the Kuiper Belt is where things get really interesting again. So Pluto has 5 moons. 5! Isn't that crazy? Pluto's tiny and it has 5 moons. Anyways, we only have 1 moon. Kind of pissed. So Pluto is named after the Roman god of death, and according to Roman myth, when someone died, they traveled down to the underworld. First, they had to cross the river of the dead named Styx, which is the name of one of Pluto's small moons. And everyone, when they died, was buried with a coin to pay the ferryman Charon, which is the name of Pluto's largest moon, which is Charon is almost as massive as Pluto, so massive that the center of mass of the 2 planets is actually outside of Pluto. So they two things always orbit each other, but it's really obvious between Pluto and Charon. But Charon would carry the dead across the river Styx in his boat. And the naming of Pluto's other moons also follows this underworld theme. Like Nyx is one of them. She's the Greek goddess of darkness and night and the mother of Charon. Hydra is the 9-headed serpent which battled Hercules. Kerberos, aka Cerberus, but the IAU would only accept the Greek name for it, was the 3-headed dog that guarded the entrance to the underworld in Greek mythology. And then also in the Kuiper Belt we have Ares, which, although it's not a moon, is an object like I said, in the Kuiper Belt, which is nearly the size of Pluto, that orbits even farther out, and it's named for the Greek goddess of strife and discord, which is very befitting considering the uproar she caused in dethroning Pluto. Its moon Dysnomia is named for the daughter of Ares, and its name means lawlessness and anarchy. So basically, when you're making your interplanetary summer vacation plans, stay away from the moons, except for Uranus moons, because those are pretty cute. Alright, we'll get back to some music. We have reports that the universe is 10 times more vast than we previously thought. So I'm reading this story from Astronomy Magazine, where according to a team of researchers at Nottingham University, the universe's galaxy population was lowballed by about a factor of 20. So they used data from Hubble as well as a new mathematical model to estimate that there are 10 times more galaxies in the observable universe than previously thought. But what does this term observable universe mean? Well, light travels at a set speed. At this speed, we can only see something that exists 10 million light years away as it was 10 million years ago, because that's how long it took the light to reach us. This means that the scientists aren't necessarily guessing how many galaxies currently exist, but they've learned how many galaxies we'd be able to see right now if our instruments were good enough. Essentially, what these astronomers did was they compared galaxy clusters that were older, aka farther away, to those that are younger, aka closer. Using this comparison, they could run this rate backwards to find that 90% of the galaxies that are out there are too faint and far away for us to see with our current instrumentation. So McAllister, next time you look into the city's night sky, know that there's an even greater unfathomable amount of bright stuff in this seemingly dim sky. Sorry, we have one more story to cover before that about the new addition to our stellar neighborhood, so stay tuned. Hey, guess what? So there's a new member of our family to welcome. His name is Isaac, short for Sir Isaac Newton, after the inventor of calculus and conqueror of gravity. He's got the most gorgeous, sparkly blue eyes you've ever seen, and his little mews just melt my heart. So a friend from back home found a litter of 3 kittens under the deck of her house a few days ago, and her landlord wouldn't let her keep them, and the Humane Society was at capacity and couldn't take them. So my boyfriend and I agreed to step in and adopt the new little baby into our family. I'll get to officially meet him when I go home for fall break next week, and I literally can't wait. I almost cried when I saw him over Skype today. He's so sweet. So I was going to relate this story to the discovery of a dwarf planet, air quotes, that was recently discovered in the Kuiper Belt, but the object is like tiny, like really tiny, like so small, like smaller than some of the big things in the asteroid belt. And the term dwarf planet just kind of was thrown in there to hype it up. I mean, it's cool how they detected it, which was like by comparing pictures of the same area over time, and they were doing this by hand and looking for things that moved, which is like a super old school planetary detection method, like how Pluto was discovered. So the images that they attribute to their discovery, interestingly, aren't consecutive like most for discovering planetary objects are, which means that trying to map out an orbit of this thing is going to be tricky with the current data that they have. So they'll probably have to collect some more before releasing anything else beyond, hey, here's a cool thing we found. But anyways, I really just wanted to talk about my kitten. So thanks for listening. Next up, we'll close the show with why study science at a liberal arts school. Hey, welcome back. So I've had this thought tugging at the back of my brain all week. I am a science fanatic, and I know for a fact that I'm going into a very STEM-intensive research field. So why wouldn't I go into a science or technical school? Wouldn't MIT or Caltech or literally any state school be better for someone going into a STEM field? I knew in high school that I was going to be an astrophysicist, but I only applied to liberal arts colleges. Because at a liberal arts college, you're literally getting the best of everything. At McAllister, I have an astronomy class taught by a real astronomer who can show me papers of the research he's done and has had published, who I can do research with if I want to, who, if the word science could be distilled into one person, it would be him. But paradoxically, he is a poet trapped in the body of an astrophysicist. Like if someone came to major in English but accidentally became an astronomer along the way. The eloquence of his mannerisms never ceases to blow me away. but I'm also in a class taught by a human rights attorney, a part-time lawyer who much rather prefers to be a professor at Mac, who fights us every single class and makes us sit in garbled uncertainty and rack our brains for an answer to his impossible ethical dilemma questions. I have a math professor who has totally broken down my previous conception of multivariable calculus into a feasible, digestible subject that has real-world application, and who happens to actually care about us as people and not just students. I am an astrophysicist. Last week, I watched Shooting Dogs for the first time for my Introduction to International Human Rights class. We were discussing the Rwandan genocide, a topic I had only covered for minutes as a freshman in an intro English class. I was sobbing by the end. It was such a beautiful, poetic, and so utterly tragic film, and I felt something change in me. Some kind of compassion switch was flipped in my brain. I realized how I've been living my life in true ignorance of every privilege that has been given to me. Most importantly, I became inspired to help others. I would never turn into one of those in the film who could, for whatever reason, do nothing to help those who were suffering. I will make it my mission to help those who are less fortunate than me, to reach out to other humans and share some of what I've been blessed with. In studying the astronomical scopes of the universe, it can be easy to be pulled away from the Earth, to be roped into black holes and galactic habitability zones and Doppler shift and gamma ray bursts. But studying human rights brings me back to Earth. It keeps me grounded. I know that there's a vast universe waiting for me to explore, but I have a moral obligation as a human being to have compassion for humanity. This has been Astro Chats. Thanks for listening.